Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Uh, so, so it is our great pleasure to have Dr. Feryal with us again. In fact, Feryal, I didn't tell you this. I guess I was afraid that it might spoil your fasting during Ramadan.
Oh.
But a dear friend, who's been a Muslim now for a long time, and but did not grow up in the Muslim tradition, but a dear friend told me last night, or told me in an email, maybe it came this morning, that last night was one of the very best ones.
Oh, really?
He says, mostly because Dr. Feryal Salem was there with you. So I said, yeah, it was great. And she'll be joining us on other evenings too. At that time, I didn't know that you'd be with us tonight, but this is so wonderful.
Well, that's encouraging to hear, because I really had no idea what I was going to talk about. And it's my second time ever doing a podcast. So
well, it's unscripted. It's Ramadan unscripted. That was the whole idea, is that we're coming together with sincerity and with a love of the Qur'an. This is what I guess Dr. Asrar would have called our duty to the Qur'an, right?
Yeah.
We are how shall I say? We are in compliance with our duty to the Qur'an, that we're celebrating the gifting of the Qur'an to humanity this month, and we're doing it in a way that is just sincere and unscripted, and we don't know where the Spirit will take us. So, alhamdulillah.
Okay. The Spirit is going to take us to our intro video, but I was told again last night that it always interrupts mid-sentence. So we give it a pause for a few seconds.
The mission and vision of the American Islamic College, to me, pretty much now synonymous with the work. I believe in the transformative power of education, and not just education that is informative, but in education that is transformative, education that really changes how we live. But I think that the Muslims of America need a place that they can come as a Muslim space. This is their space. It belongs to them.
All right.
And indeed, the American Islamic College does belong to them, but I should have said it belongs to us. And it's, but this is, I look forward to the day when we see countless Muslim institutions of higher education flowering all over the landscape. But to date, we have only 2 independent Muslim institutions of higher education that have achieved accreditation, and we're very blessed to be affiliated with one of them. So, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. All right. Well, you can see that the surahs are getting a bit shorter in length, and so as we go further and further, we'll have more surahs in any given juz. And so we've got most of Surah Yusuf. We started a little bit in the previous part of the Qur'an. We're in the 13th part tonight. But we also have Surah Ra'ad, Thunder, and a surah, a chapter entitled Ibrahim. Yes. And so a lot to cover. And I know, Dr. Timothy, you have great love for Surah Yusuf, as does Dr. Feryal, and we started last time, but you want to bring us into today?
Well, let me just throw out, and you can tell me if you think I'm crazy, 2 general readings. The first of them is almost like a Joseph Campbellian idea of the hero's journey. So before Yusuf alayhi salam, upon him be peace, before he could be, exalted, right? He had to be cast into the well. He had to be betrayed by his brothers and cast into the well and sold into slavery and falsely accused of a terrible crime and had to be thrown into prison. And he had to go through all of this difficulty and seemingly how shall I say, disastrous series of events until he was raised up, almost like this hero's journey. And it's, We see it in the lives of the prophets. We see it we were talking a little bit about mythology last night, but we also see it in mythology. But there's this sense that that unless all of those things happened in that sequence, that Yusuf alayhi salam could not have been exalted in the way that he was. And again, it wasn't in a kind of egotistical exaltation.
Mhm.
It was a testament to God's benevolence and God's power. And even after he emerged, right, and he's talking to his father, that God was so good to me, right, that he had the ability, the almost superhuman ability to be grateful for all that had happened that had brought him to that point. And so one is this idea of the hero's journey. And we see that playing out in the lives, of Yunus, of Jonah. We see it played out in the life of the Prophet Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam, who had to be cast out of his hometown and then had to come back triumphant. And we see it here so beautifully. And so, again, we were reminded of the counterintuitive nature of hardship and difficulty, and how sometimes the hardship comes as a manifestation of God's love and God's benevolence, because God knows that we would never get to where we need to go until and unless we endure these things. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing, and I'll stop talking after this. The other thing is my reading of Joseph's gift of course, patience. He has all these beautiful gifts, but the gift is often translated as the interpretation of dreams, whereas in the Qur'an, literally, it's ta'wil al-ahadith, the interpretation of events. And so for me, Surah Yusuf is almost like an introduction to this life as the dreamscape. And that this life and the events of this life, just like the events of a dream, like what does that color mean in the dream? Or what does it mean that I broke my right arm in the dream? We think of it's all symbolic, but Yusuf's gift, the interpretation of events, seems to indicate that this is the world, that we're living in a world that is symbolic, and that none of the events in our world are what they seem to be, and they need to be interpreted God's inspiration and revelation so that we can decode what's even going on in this world. And so these are my two kind of initial how shall I say, irrepressible ideas that come whenever I turn to Surah Yusuf.
What you said about Prophet Yusuf suffering and going through all of these hardships, and that being something that was transformative for him, really resonated with me. And it reminds me of in the beginning of the surah, when he's in the well, God gives him a revelation.
Right.
Yeah, God gives him. I'm trying to find the verse. Does anyone have it?
Yeah, I'm coming.
In the beginning.
Okay, he goes. Yeah.
وأوحينا إليه
Yes.
لتنبئنهم بأمرهم هذا وهم لا يشعرون. And we revealed to him that they will be informed of what they did without them even realizing it. That one day that it's going to come back full circle. And to me, this is really just poignant and moving in that when we have the ears of our heart open, that God sends us ilham. So prophets get wahi, but humans, regular people, we also get ilham. So it may be if you have shayateen or devils that whisper to an individual, if that's something that is spoken of and understood in our tradition, there are also angels that whisper to us, don't say this here, don't do this there, don't do that. But, it's the individual through spiritual discipline and through being connected to the unseen world, through ibadah and worship and these kinds of regular acts that enables the ear of their heart to be open to these kinds of communications with the unseen.
Mm.
We see in the surah that the heart, the spiritual heart, can see, and the spiritual heart can smell, because when Jacob smelled the smell of Joseph in
Yeah.
Egypt, it wasn't a physical smell, it was a spiritual smell.
Yeah.
Here, God is revealing to him that this is going to come full circle. And, it's so often that in our most difficult moments, that is the most, that is the time that the greatest light and connection comes with Allah, with God. The most difficult moments are many times for the believer the most blessed and fruitful moments, because it's there that the believer has nowhere to turn to except God.
Yeah.
And to me, those specific words in that verse were really
Yeah.
valuable. And then I love how you mentioned how throughout the surah we see that Joseph, he goes through so many hardships, and at the end he's always grateful to God. He never is like, God, why did you do this to me? God, I reject this. No, he has shukr. لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you
Yeah.
give thanks, that we will.
God will give you
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is the amazing thing. I was actually preaching about this several weeks ago, and it just stuns me that after everything he's been through, he could say, God has been so good to me. It's just like incredible. But you're absolutely right that it's there, but it's so counterintuitive. It takes training to see the light inside the fire and the difficulty and the pain. It takes training, because normally when we get thrown into a well, we think, why me? Like, why wasn't it somebody else? Like, I've been a good guy, God. Why are you throwing me into a well? So we think of it as a punishment rather than as a mercy. And somehow Yusuf was able to, embrace it all as being part of God's benevolent plan, which is incredible.
I mean, that's the very definition of submission, right? Of being Muslim, is to submit to whatever circumstances we're in. And it reminds me of the hadith, عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ فَإِنَّ أَمْرُهُ كُلُّهُ خَيْرٌ. I'm amazed at the affairs of the believer, because everything that happens to him is good. If a hardship happens, he is patient and he's rewarded. If a good thing happens, he is happy and he's grateful to God and he's rewarded. So there's this attitude within the Islamic framework of seeing everything, good and bad, as being a form of good that's coming from God, and being grateful. And it's a form of spiritual discipline that we cultivate within ourselves. I think it was Oprah a long time ago who had this gratefulness journal, and it was a trend in the 90s or the early 2000s of this gratitude-centered living, and how having gratitude shifts the mindset of people. And you had all these women that were buying the gratitude journals. And I'm thinking, subhanAllah, this is actually part and parcel. It's like the first thing that Muslims are taught in their tradition is the cultivation of gratitude, and how seeing the world through a positive lens rather than through the lens of punishment or God's wrath or guilt or all of these other possible ways that one could look at the events around them, how that creates a form of happiness, regardless of what circumstance or situation.
This is like almost the Aristotelian notion of happiness, that is not pleasure, but it's a sense of well-being regardless of one's circumstance. And and absolutely, and the gratitude, as the Qur'an says so clearly, that God doesn't need your gratitude, but you're only grateful li anfusikum, for the good of your own souls. And so the gratitude of Yusuf is amazing, at the end. And we'll talk also about the transformative power of forgiveness also at the end. But Mahan, you've been very, very quiet, Sidi. So that worries me.
No, I'm really enjoying listening to the two of you. It's wonderful. These are wonderful reflections. And if I were to add anything, I'd just continue with some of the things that you've already offered. Towards the end of the surah, when the address turns back to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, says ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ نُوحِيهِ إِلَيْكَ. So these are, this account is part of what was beyond your knowledge. It happened in the unseen, but we revealed it to you. You were not present with Joseph's brothers when they made their treacherous plans, right? And then I'm going to just skip over a few verses. And it again says in 109, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِكَ إِلَّا رِجَالًا نُوحِي إِلَيْهِمْ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْقُرَى, right? So all the messengers we sent before you, Muhammad, were men to whom we made revelations, men chosen from the people of their towns. And we'll see in Surah Ibrahim coming up, a couple down, it's part of today's section, that God only sends messengers in their own language, in the language of the people, so that they can make it clear. But I'm going to tie this into, your comment, Dr. Timothy, about this is all a dreamscape. And also, Dr. Feryal, what you were saying is that there's that we have inner senses of smell and of hearing and of seeing. So the verse 12:108, because the question was raised before on Basira. And so this is the verse. قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي. So the Prophet is being told to say, this is my way. أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ. I call towards God. عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ أَنَا. With the translation here is evidence, but this is basira. This is insight,
intuitive vision. Yeah,
inner vision.
Yeah.
And those who follow me, so they actually see things that others don't see. And part of the cultivation of the self is to be able to develop that capacity. Sometimes people are just born with it, perhaps, and gifted with it. There are those who are chosen. But then there are those who work, or they're given. I don't want to say that those who do it on their own, because the whole message of the surah is it's God makes your life, really. Anyone who thinks that they've made their own life is deluded. We are given circumstances, and all those circumstances are a test, and everything that we're doing is a response. And so we then go through the whole story, and we encourage you to read this because it's like a tantalizing story of Yusuf. But in the beginning, he sees a dream. What's his response to that dream? It's all a series of responses. He goes to tell his father. And what's his father's response? Don't tell your brothers. They'll be jealous. But the brothers are jealous anyways. And what's their response to their jealousy when they see the special love between Joseph and his father? They say, kill him, feed him to the wolves. And so they go to their father, right? They made the wrong choice. And they ask for his permission. And what's the father's response? He doesn't want to let him go. He suspects the brothers.
Yeah, he does.
But he doesn't say no. He's caught in a bind. Because if he says no, it will further alienate them. And if he says yes, he risks losing, his beloved son. And so he says, I'm worried. And they assure him, but he doesn't stop them. So there's these situations in life when there's ambiguity. I feel the surah is teaching us responsiveness. And then, he's thrown in the well. And what's the father's response? There's another response. Sabrun jameel.
Wallahu musta'an. And God will help.
Yeah, you have to, be patient. And then you could go on with the surah, but then there's the desire, right? And what's the response of desire? You could have chastity and keep your gaze, and but you could also give into it. and then there's seduction, and so she
Mm.
makes the wrong choice and she seduces him. Now he has a choice. وَهَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا. They both desired each other, but he flees. Like, and then this was what you mentioned yesterday,
The
Dr. Feryal.
Burhan. He saw the Burhan
He
from
saw
Allah.
the Burhan meaning like a clear sign or argument or
Or the light,
evidence.
as Dr.
The light.
Feryal said yesterday.
Yeah, the light. And so he flees, right? And then they're caught, and then they have to plead their case, and he's exonerated, but he's compromised. And then all the women come, and the wife says, "Look, you blame me, but look how attractive he is. You can't hold yourselves back." And now he has to respond, and he says, "Asijnu ahabbu ilayya." His response is, "Get me out of here.
Mm.
I can't stay here. This is too dangerous."
Yeah,
And now he's in
again,
prison.
the Arabic is prison is more dear to me than what you are calling me to, right?
Right. And so he's in prison, and he could potentially kind of, he's dealing with each. I feel like, I really like Matt Damon in Mars, solving one problem at a time. He's not looking at trying to get to the king. He's just surviving and responding ethically at every stage. And so he's in prison, and he doesn't know what's going to happen. And then these people come with him, and they see these dreams, and he's like, "Oh, I can tell you what this means." And so the one of them who's going to be freed, he tells him, now here's his response again, "Mention me to the king." And so he's putting himself forward, right? And so one response to life is actually to say, all right, I can do this, and I belong somewhere else. And then when he goes to the king, he says, make me in charge of the storehouses, the treasures, because I'm trustworthy. And so you can actually take responsibility, and you don't always have to shun it, but you can actually seek it when you feel you will do good in a higher position. And then obviously the brothers come, and he responds to them. So you can also deceive. He deceived his brothers, but for a cause that was good. And so the series of responses, I think, are so instructive, one after the other. And I was reminded as I was reading this, Scott Appleby, there are many definitions of religion in religious studies, but his definition is, he has a book called The Ambivalence of the Sacred. It's a great title because he says that no outcome is inevitable. Like a human being who is in the same situation might respond, the two human beings in the same situation might respond very differently to the same provocation or the same circumstances. And so the ambivalence of the sacred, like religion is this mysterious thing where it's a human response to a reality perceived as sacred. And I think what the surah here is instructing us is, you don't know where you're going to end up. You don't know where God is going to put you and what kind of things are going to come at you. But you need to be conditioned that in every state you respond as is befitting a person who submits. And
wow.
And that is Islam in a way.
That's a beautiful reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really incredible. As you were talking about that, I was thinking about how each of these responses is a form of sabr, and perhaps that's one of the themes of the surah, is the connection between sabr, patience, perseverance, and gratitude. So with patience comes gratitude. So there, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah writes that there are two forms of sabr. The first is sabr ala al-ma'siyah, which is patience or perseverance against committing sins, which is a form of patience that we see here that Yusuf practices when he is tempted by Zulaykha. And another form of sabr is patience with hardships. And again, we see this again as practiced by Yusuf. And one of the most famous phrases from the surah, "Sabrun Jamil," is the father of Yusuf, Jacob. It comes from him. And again, it reminds me of that hadith, "Ajaban li amr al-mu'min." I'm amazed at the affairs of the believer. When a hardship happens, he's patient and he is rewarded. That creates a sense of gratitude. When a good thing happens, he is grateful and he's rewarded that everything is good.
No,
And I
how
was, yeah,
how
go
to translate sabrun jamil,
Sabrun Jamil.
which is
And
the
patience is
It's
beautiful.
actually it's a
Yeah.
jumla ismiya. So
Yeah.
it's a sabrun jamilun. Patience is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
or is it sifa mausuf, like
Beautiful
it's not
patience.
sabru jamil, it's sabrun jamilun. And but
Hmm.
I'm not
Oh,
going
wallahu musta'an.
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's
I always understood it as Dr. Timothy's first
Mm.
definition.
Okay.
That patience is beautiful.
yeah, jumla
Uh,
ismiya, yeah, like a non-verbal sentence, like
Yeah.
just a nominal sentence, yeah.
And knowing that Jacob is a prophet, that he has also knowledge of the unseen, he would have known that this was a part of God's plan and that he was patient with it.
And he seems to know that even when Yusuf alayhi salam recites to him his dream and says, "Ya abati, I saw the sun and the moon and 11 planets bowing down to me," and he said, "Don't don't narrate your dream to your brothers."
Right.
So he seems to already know kind of what's coming, and so I think Yaqub alayhi salam, Jacob also has a deep intuitive basira, like a visionary way of knowing that the falsehood that's brought to him can't be true.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
So we have
know?
couple of questions online. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum
And
assalam.
yeah, and so any thoughts about the way in which this surah teaches us about the plotting of evil or the psychology of perpetrators? Those who are plotting will use exactly what the victim said they would do rather than something out of imagination. For example, Yaqub says to his sons, "I fear you will take Yusuf alayhi salam, and he will be eaten by a wolf." So then the brothers do exactly just that, right? And they throw him in the well, but they come back and they say, "Well, he was eaten by a wolf." So, is there a lesson for us here in learning about the psychology of perpetrators? That's the question.
To me, what another very striking thing about this surah again is what Yusuf says at the very end when he forgives his brothers, right, and he welcomes them all to Egypt, and he says that even after Satan had sown enmity between me and my brothers. This is ayah 100, and so interestingly, Iblis's or Satan's sin is jealousy, right? I mean, that's the core of it, is his jealousy of Adam as God's Khalifa, as God's vicegerent or steward. And the sin of Joseph's brothers is exactly that. It's the jealousy of the specialness of Yusuf, which later on they acknowledge and they say, okay, we're sorry, you are special, and we're good with that now. But it's so at least in this case, Yusuf alayhi salam didn't treat them like twisted human beings who had done something terrible. He saw them as victims of Satan's plot, the caught in the devil's snares, and Yusuf, it was God's prophet who then extracted them from those satanic snares and brought them into a space of light and forgiveness and redemption. And they were sorry, and they were, it wasn't like they were not contrite. They were deeply sorry for what they had done, and that's part of it. But
And
so
again, so go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Again, we see the deep spirituality of Joseph, because even when Zuleika at the end admits that she was the one who tempted him, he says, "La ubarri'u nafsi." I don't say my nafs, my desires, or my soul is free of wrongdoing either. meaning, and in the tradition of Islamic spirituality, this idea of the nafs is the lower part of one's desires that tempts one to do wrong, to envy, to do other things. And so we see from the way he responds to Potiphar's wife, to Aziz's wife, and also the way he responds to his brothers, he is the exemplar of one who is truly, who has really truly purified his heart of envy and grudges and humility. After all of that, he accepts the apology of his brothers. He doesn't hold a grudge against them. He also accepts the apology of Aziz's wife. Yeah.
And so in the end, nobody goes to prison. Like everybody is redeemed in a way.
Yeah.
Because of his incredible character and because of his
is a lesson here that I don't know if it's appropriate to generalize, but if you have if you are wrongdoer, if wrong has been done to you, but you respond in ways that are that befit a believer's conduct, then if the blessing of that response will also spread to the perpetrators and perhaps might redeem them as well through you. I don't know.
Well, this is the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, right? When he came back to Mecca triumphant, he could have done anything he wanted. He could have issued any kind of order, and at least according to that one narration that I referred to earlier, immediately Yusuf and his brothers was in his mind. Like he was immediately in Yusuf's place, and he had the ability to not to forgive, but he forgave, and by forgiving, all those forgiven people instantly became Muslims, and he didn't ever hold grudges against any of them. They became integrated completely and automatically. Even some of the long-standing Muslims who had suffered by his side were kind of like, what? How can you do this?
Yeah, like as you say this, I'm also thinking of Ta'if. When the angel said, "Should I just crush these people for how they've treated you?" And he said, "No, and maybe their future generations will take heed." And so he saved that, because of the way he responded in that moment. On this theme of response, I'm jumping to Surah Ra'd, verse 18. Check it out. I feel almost it's helping me with Surah Yusuf. لِلَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبِّهِمْ.
There it is.
Isn't it cool?
Yeah. As for those who respond to their Lord,
their Lord are all good things. But those who respond not to him, وَالَّذِينَ لَمْ يَسْتَجِيبُوا لَهُ لَوْ أَنَّ لَهُمْ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا وَمِثْلَهُ مَعَهُ لَافْتَدُوا بِهِ. Yeah, they would, even if they had all that is in the heavens and on the earth, and as much more, in vain would they offer it for ransom, because they didn't respond to their Lord. It won't benefit them. So this whole response, how we respond, it's critical. I mean, I didn't choose to be born to my parents in Pakistan and then to be a man, That isn't my choice. But you have to kind of now inhabit the world with what you've been given. And, from a worldly sense, this tremendous privilege in which I was born. Other people will look at me and think, I'm nothing, but much of the world will see me as so privileged. And so I didn't create this, right? I responded to what was given, and others do the same. And then we take credit for it all, right? But that's ridiculous. Like as if, you did this all yourself. Anyways, that's the...
No, I think your point that it's all about like our responses to our circumstances, they truly define us. And I
And here, go ahead. Go ahead.
And
Dr.
it's
Feryal.
also in this verse that the Quran says that God raises people by degrees, and above
Uh-huh.
everyone of knowledge is someone of greater knowledge. So degrees here specifically, the reference is to فوق كل ذي علم عليم, is knowledge, but degrees are also in this world. So these are the very circumstances that that you were talking about, Dr. Mahan, and that people have been, you know, privilege isn't really the word that we would say, but perhaps God has blessed or given different people different circumstances to see how they respond to their
Yeah.
circumstances.
Yeah.
And so we, you know, the believer sees that as it's all from God. It's nothing that we have is from our own accomplishments. We don't have, you know, the believer doesn't have this issue of imposter syndrome because we embrace our imposterhood, right? We embrace that we're imposters. It is only through God that we have
That
been
has just helped me so much right now.
yeah, I mean, every one of us is an imposter. It is only through God. وَمَا تَوْفِيقِي إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ.
Yeah.
So just being very comfortable with our imposterhood and that understanding that it is only through God's power that we accomplish anything gives us this incredible ability to be vulnerable, to be sincere, to be authentic, to be humble, all of these things, regardless of what we have, whether it's wealth, whether it's knowledge, whether it's power, understanding that it's from God and not our own actions.
There's two places here that connect to this theme in Surah Ra'd, maybe three, that I've marked, and one that's disconnected. So I'm going to skip that. But if maybe look at verse 26, 28, and 31, if you want to go with me a little bit. So the 26, you know, Allahu yabsutu rizqa liman yasha'u wa yaqdir. Like, you know, all this is here, but blessed in a way, right? But you're blessed if it's not here, if you respond the right way. Because God, the verse says, gives abundantly to whomsoever he wills, and sparingly to whomsoever he wills. Or like he makes it, you know, constrains it. And so it's not about what, you know, this is all God's. And your job is to respond. And if you look at 28, you're not going to be satisfied. If you have abundance, quote unquote abundance, you're not going to be satisfied. Some of the most dissatisfied people are the wealthiest because they're kind of, you know, in the thick of things, and they want more, and they always feel like they're going to lose it all. So there's this uncertainty. And so the only way you're going to be satisfied, whether you've got a lot or whether you've got nothing, is verse 28. Those who believe, their hearts find remembrance, their hearts find peace in the remembrance of God. Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. It's only with the remembrance of God that the hearts will find peace. All the other stuff, you're going to be pulling your hair out if that's what you're inhabiting. If that's the space you're inhabiting. And the last one, 31, I'm just going to do these three and then feel free to kind of engage wherever you want or take us somewhere else. Is verse 31. It's a long verse, but in the middle it says,
Is that the one? Do not the believers know that had God so willed, he could have guarded all humankind? Yeah.
That's the part. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. If God had wanted, lahada nasa jamia.
Yeah.
And so we also pull our hair out. Like, why don't people think like us? Why don't people believe like us? Why? You know? And it's like, look, slow down. If God had wanted, everyone would have been guided, as you know, according to how you think. But this is not up to you.
Right.
And the prophet is told, just convey.
Yeah.
That's it. Don't worry about it.
and we've seen that, just articulated slightly differently in earlier portions that we've looked at with, that God could have created humankind in ummah wahda, as an ummah, as a single community. But God did not do that in order that God might test you in what you have been given. And then we have other, like last night, we had that very interesting conversation about free will. And these are very, very important points. I just want to take us back for a second to Surah Yusuf.
Sure.
And this idea that God always calls a messenger from like your own people. And so when I read, Alif Lam Ra tilka ayat al-kitab al-mubin inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyyan la'allakum ta'qilun, that surely we have revealed it as an Arabic recitation in order that you might like think and contemplate. To me, it's sort of like God shaking the Arabs by their shoulders and saying, look, I'm revealing it to you in your own language, right? Like it's truly like God is coming down and entering history and entering a specific cultural reality and is giving them these signs like from one of their own in their own language, and still most people are not buying it. And so, but it's a powerful kind of example of this Quranic idea that God always will speak to people and guide people through one of their own. And yet that's also one of the great challenges people have in accepting prophets. They say a prophet is never accepted. Jesus says in the Gospels that a prophet is never accepted in his hometown because people, I guess, feel that sense of envy or like, well, what's so special about you? And it's the egos that get in the way.
In Urdu, that's ghar ki murgi dal barabar. For the Urdu
That means I've heard of it.
You know what that means?
I don't. It just sounds funny to me. Go ahead.
Sheikh Hamza once he had an event in Zaytuna where he was for supporters, and it was in the Bay Area supporters, and so someone taught him this line and he said it in Urdu and the whole audience erupted. It means that you don't value the food you have at home. You always want to go out and eat, and so whether it's chicken, or it's dal, they're all the same at home. That's what the saying is. Ghar ki murgi dal barabar. I think it's like the Prophet is not appreciated in his hometown. It resonates with that. But I have a tough question for both of you.
Okay.
Or maybe it's not that tough. So I'm looking at Surah Ibrahim, verse number 4. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُم. So we have not sent a messenger who did not use his own people's language to make things clear for them. At the same time, we are looking at an Arabic Qur'an, but we claim it's universal. How do we square that?
Well, having the Qur'an in the original language or having a scripture in the original language has given Muslims an incredible advantage over other traditions where there isn't that original, what did Jesus say exactly in his own words? Because it's been translated into Greek and then it's been translated into English. And so there are many, many, many interpretations, and a lot of it lost. Now, Arabic, the greatest grammarians were non-Arabs, right? I mean, the greatest grammarians were Persians, and every scholar of Islam knew and knows Arabic. You can't be a scholar of Islam without Arabic, and they're not Arabs who know Arabic. I mean, so having a language, having the scripture in its original language, being able to say these were the precise words that were said, it is an incredible advantage, I think, that Muslims have, in that it anchors our, and that's why I will commonly use an Arabic phrase and then translate it, because Arabic is always that anchor. Because when we want to know, well, what exactly does it mean? We can go back to the original word and then find all the derivatives of that word and think about how that phrase would have meant something within that context. So historically, traditionally, culturally, Muslims have never had an issue with the Qur'an being in Arabic. My grandmother's father, who was an Ottoman Bey Effendi, he knew Arabic, he knew Ottoman, he knew Persian, he knew French.
MashaAllah.
But
Wow.
everybody knows Arabic, and Persian was the language of adab, and then French was the language at the time of of Europeans.
That helps. That
Yeah.
helps us understand you a little bit and how come you were so wonderful. You had a great father, mashallah.
No, my grandmother's father.
Or your grandmother's father.
From the
It's the
Ottoman.
lineage. It's the
So in
genes.
the past, yes, in the past. So today, I mean, it's only today that we find learning Arabic a challenge, but Muslims always knew Arabic. Muslims who were educated, learned, Arabic was, I mean, we all kind of speak English now, don't we? Without being Anglo-Saxon.
Yeah. But the question, I take your point, but every time we go to the Arabic, we're mediating, right? There's human mediation, and there's so many different interpreters. I mean, we're looking at different translations. So, but I take your point on that, and obviously I'm not contesting it. This is only like by Abraham when he said, "Show me how you bring the dead to life." It's just with understanding.
But
Go ahead.
the answer too, though, could be in the I guess the Quranic argument for progressive revelation, right? That the prophets were really all teaching the same religion, and they were all practicing the same religion. The modality, like how they taught prayer, might have been different, or how they described the divinity could have been slightly different depending upon the cultural norms and the understandings of their own societies. But if indeed the Prophet Muhammad is the seal of the prophets, he's like the last piece to be put in the arch in a way. And so it's not so much that the world has to, that Arabic now is the universal language for all of humanity, but it's almost as if the prophetic cycle is complete. And so, and the last community that was in need of a messenger from one of their own, they had heard about others, right? They clearly, the Quran assumes familiarity with the names of a lot of these prophets, and that the people, the original audience of the Quran, had heard about them. And we know that there were Jews and Christians in the deserts of Arabia, and so it wasn't that they didn't have some knowledge, but the tribes, the pagan tribes of Arabia, were like the last people to be reached, and that final and definitive articulation was in their language. And so maybe that's how and why we don't need, let's say, an American free verse prophet who's just going to be like, doing it in American slang, or that maybe all the world had been served already, and that last pocket to be served was clearly they were in a deeply poetic Arabic tradition, so they had a very sophisticated and incredible language, even though it was mostly unwritten. And so the one, that's why the prophet who was sent to them and through them to the world was called the seal, right? The seal of the prophets. Again, I mean, we haven't gotten to this part of the Quran yet, but this is just maybe one way of answering that question.
Sure. Well, we're at time.
Oh,
so we should probably wrap it up. I want to wrap it up. Can I read? I'm going to read the first few verses of Ibrahim in closing. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I seek refuge. This is chapter 14, the last chapter in this part 13 that we have for today. I seek refuge in God from Satan, the accursed. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, compassionate, the merciful. Alif Lam Ra. This is a book that we have sent down unto thee, that thou mightest bring forth mankind out of darkness into light, by the leave of their Lord, unto the path of the mighty, the praised. God, unto whom belongs whatsoever is in the heavens and whatsoever is on the earth. Woe unto the disbelievers for a severe punishment, those who prefer the life of this world over the hereafter, and who turn away from the way of God and seek to make it crooked. It is they who are far astray. And we have sent no messenger save in the language of his people, that he might make clear unto them. Then God leads astray whomsoever he will, and guides whomsoever he will. And he is the mighty, the wise.
Mm.
It's beautiful. Even in English, it's beautiful.
Even in English.
Mm.
There are many renderings of it. This one was study Qur'an, but you can read it in other forms in English. All right, that does it for tonight.
Yes, thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you.
And thanks to all who are with us tonight and who might be with us on their own time after this. And we will look forward to night 14 tomorrow, inshallah.
Tomorrow, we're almost halfway there. We were driving for iftar today, and it was it looked like a full moon. So
Almost.
almost halfway there.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, both of you.
Well,
Thank you,
you're
Dr.
welcome. You're welcome at this table anytime, Dr. Feryal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very
Assalamu
much.
alaikum.
Great to be
Assalamu
with you.
alaikum.
Alaikum.